Coming to you from the Deep South, this is the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast. High-impact leadership is not reserved for leaders, and it has nothing to do with your position, title, or rank. However, it does have everything to do with your character. It's time to climb to the next level and beyond, personally and professionally. Now, let's start making it happen with your host, Max Story.
Hello, and thanks to another episode of Real People Getting Real Results. And just a reminder, the audio version uploads to my Blue Collar Leadership podcast, which you can find on Spotify and a lot of other apps. And the video version of this is uploaded to the Real People Getting Real Results playlist on the Blue Collar Leadership YouTube channel. And it's also in the live list there, but we got a playlist for this. So as you can see, I got a special guest today. My awesome, beautiful, amazing wife, Rhea Story. I met Rhea June 16th, 2000, and we got married October 27th, 2001. So 24 years into this thing. So thanks for hopping on the show, Rhea. You're usually in the background running everything and all the little banners that show and pop up and all that stuff. And it's usually just me interviewing someone else, but you're the one that makes it all happen. So today you got to talk and run the stuff.
Multitasking at its best. Absolutely excited to be here.
Yeah. So the reason I want to interview you, and then I'll be on next week, and you kind of interview me, but I mean, we're doing this series to interview people who have had a personal growth journey or transformation personally and or professionally. And you got both. So I think it'll be cool just to kind of share your story in a different kind of way, maybe than we normally share it when we're speaking. Obviously, it'll be the same type stuff because you're the same person, but it'll just have a little different feel to it. So how do we come to know each other? We met way back. How did that happen?
Way back. We actually met in the middle of the street many years ago. I was there in Auburn, Alabama with a friend, and you were there, I guess, with some of your friends. And yeah, we were in the middle of the street outside about maybe 9:00 at night one night.
Yeah. There was my friends. One of them I worked with, he was a bouncer at one of those college clubs in Auburn, and it was about an hour or so before they opened or something like that. And it was kind of on a side street. All the bouncers were out having their, I guess, pre-work huddle, standing in the middle of the street, no traffic. And we was in a big circle. Everybody was just talking, and you and your friend Autumn came up and started chatting with everybody. And later I met you actually inside the club when they went to work, and I walked in and kind of hung out with them and you come. Actually, I walked in and you were just standing there. So that's how we met, though. For people who don't know that was way back there. So what do you want to share about your personal growth journey? Like, what was where you want to start?
Well, that's pretty wide open-ended question, but I think when we talk about personal growth and a journey, first off, it's realizing that it is a journey, right? It's not somewhere that we're going to arrive. It's not a destination. It's somewhere we wake up and we're like, oh, I finally finished my personal growth journey, right? It is a journey, and it's a lifetime journey. But I think it's pretty cool to look back and just see how you've grown. We all can kind of think back like when we were teenagers and when you're 15 and 16, you think back now and you're like, man, I thought I had problems back then, but I didn't really have problems. And then today you're like, oh man, now I've really got problems, right? But that's a sign of growth, because when you were 15 and 16 and you thought you had problems, they were real problems, not displaying or not downplaying those at all, but recognizing that you look back now and they don't seem as significant because you've grown, right? The problem didn't change. It's just that you've grown as a natural result of living life. The cool thing is when we can be intentional about that growth, then we can grow today before we have problems tomorrow, right? Why not equip and develop ourselves today a little bit every day so that when we have challenges in life, we're better equipped to deal with them? And so recognizing that, I wouldn't have been able to articulate it way back then, but recognizing that has always been a focus for me. Now, a lot of times it was focusing on growth of competency rather than growth of character, particularly in the early years, but sort of at some level, realizing that you have to do both, right? You have to grow your skills and your competencies, but you also have to be intentional about growing character.
Yeah. So you talked about you started out growing your competency like most people do, right? But
Yep.
it takes a certain amount of character even to do that. To develop your competency, you got to have a certain amount of character. So what was it about your character? What type of traits did you possess right out of the gate that got you going just to develop your competency?
Mm. Well, I think I've always been very achievement focused. If you're familiar with I know you are, Mac, but for those listening, if you're familiar with the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 3. I'm an achiever, and I have a very driven, task focused personality that I like. I'm an implementer. I'm a doer. I want to get the things done. And early on, that meant first, getting the job that honestly paid more than $2.13 an hour plus some tips. That was my first job, was working as a waitress, and $2.13 an hour plus the tips. But even if you worked all week, that's not a very big paycheck at the end of the week. And it didn't take me long to realize, number one, that's not what I want to do the rest of my life. But number two, the job of my dreams isn't going to come find me at Pizza Hut. And if I want life to be different, I've got to do something different. So I started out, as you know, had to go get my GED, barely passed the math.
Wait a minute though. You started out at Pizza Hut as a waitress.
Yep.
So everybody who doesn't know that,
pizza crust off the floor and bussing dirty tables.
Yeah, what was that like?
It was messy. It was it was challenging in some ways, and it was rewarding in others. I loved interacting with people. The work itself, can be hard, can be messy. You're on your feet all day. You're running after people and trying to make sure that they have a good experience in the restaurant. And sometimes they don't always appreciate your efforts. I was the only server for all 36 tables during the lunch buffet. And some days we would get slammed, right? And then you finish your shift and the lunch buffet ends, and then you got to wash all those dishes. And that's not always the fun part, right? But it taught me a lot about interacting with people and really connecting with people. And, it taught me, and honestly, it helped me learn how to balance and get work done in prioritizing tasks, because you have to be really intentional about managing your time and energy when you were the only waitress in 36 tables.
Yeah, when you started out working there as a waitress at Pizza Hut, and I really appreciate all those leftovers you brought home.
No, you didn't.
I appreciated them a little too much back then because I gained some weight while you were doing that. But let me just share with folks that don't know, and we'll get to all this, but we're starting your journey, your professional journey. You started again as a waitress at Pizza Hut and in Auburn, Alabama. And you've spoken at the U.S. Capitol. You've spoken at Yale with me. I didn't get to speak with you at the Capitol. That was something you were doing. I mean, could you have ever even thought or imagined? And I'm asking this and saying this for maybe the younger folks who are, or it doesn't matter, even if you're older, if you're in an entry level position. I mean, younger folks usually starting out in that entry level position, but you had no idea one day you'd be speaking at Yale. You'd have 15, 16. How many books you have? I can't keep up. I know we've got 34 books, but
I have 20 books and journals. So
how many?
20 books and journals.
20 books and journals. And I got 15 is what I say, because I can't ever keep up with, I just keep up with that one number. 34 together is what we got. The reason it's 34, not 35, because one of them we actually authored together, which again makes it a little more tricky. So talk about that journey from working at Pizza Hut to speaking at the Capitol and speaking at Yale. And you had started, and I interrupted you because I wanted you to talk a little more about Pizza Hut. But I mean, you were homeschooled. I mean, I know some of the stuff. It's hard to interview you when I know your story, right? So I know some of those pieces, but you were homeschooled, so you had never even been to a real school. And do you want to share any of your story, your personal story of the platform? I mean, where, how you had to get started, your personal story though, before I met you, what was happening? You want to share any of that so people understand where you're coming from?
Well, I think a lot of people who are following us know our story collectively and individually, but I was a sexual abuse victim, and my father started abusing me when I was 12 years old, and it progressed over the years. to the point where, he had given me a fake wedding ring and was trafficking me to men he would meet off of the internet, and, really forcing me to play the role of his wife. And, I was desperate to escape, which is why I left home at 19, duffel bag and a pillowcase stuffed with clothes and not much else. But, we can take what life gives us and be bitter about it or better because of it. And, growing up and being homeschooled, uh, what I learned was how to be a self-motivated learner, right? It's not that I necessarily had a phenomenal education or even a substandard education, but what I had learned was how to go learn, right? How to go get knowledge when I needed it. And I think that's an important skill that, certainly helped me be driven and task focused over the years. But yeah, when I looked around and when you and I met, and then I decided I wanted to go get a job and start making some money, I didn't have any experience. I didn't have a high school diploma because I didn't go to a regular school. And of course, when you don't have any experience and you don't have any education, it's really hard to get a job doing much of anything other than waiting tables or something entry level. But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We all start somewhere, and that's just where I started. And I'm not ashamed of that. And I think it's something that I'm glad to be able to say, hey, I've come from that and I've come to this, right? So I think you asked me to share the story, but we could talk all day on the 24 years, but go ahead.
Well, let me just ask, since you talked about and shared a little of your personal story. I mean, there's a lot of people who, I mean, you went through what I call extreme, horrific abuse as a teenager, and that's your story there. You're sharing that. Anybody wants to hear like a 7-minute? Tell them about that TEDx talk real quick. What would they see and hear? Because there's a lot of people out there who've suffered some trauma, some different types of abuse, or life's hard in general. So you've written 3 books. For those that don't know, you've written 3 books on your story. If they go to that link that you just had up, they can actually see your TEDx talk and also 3 of your books that relate to that. And so just talk to that a little bit about what you talked about in that TEDx talk, what they would see and why you picked that topic. Because there's people out there who are going through some stuff or have been through some stuff, and you wrote those 3 books to help them.
Well, why I picked the topic for my TEDx talk was the theme of resilience. Why I specifically chose the title Bridges Out of the Past is I think so often that when we go through adversity or trauma, or we go through something in our history, a chapter maybe we're not proud of, so much of the time we build a wall around it, right? We shut it up and say, I don't want to go there. I don't want to look back. I don't want to own that piece of my story, or that chapter of my story, if you will. But instead of building a wall around the past, I think we have to build a bridge out of the past and into the future. And that's just a way of saying, until I'm really ready to own all of the chapters of my story, it's going to own me, right? And so I think there again, what happens to us is not as important as who we become because of it. And that's always been my theme, right? My one foundational message is we don't get to choose often what happens in life, but we choose how we respond to it. And how we respond to it determines if we are going to be bitter about something or better because of it. Not an easy choice, but it's absolutely the greatest freedom that we have.
Yeah, and when I met Rhea, that was still happening to her for about 3 months before she trusted me enough to share with me. So I made sure that stopped happening that day, and been supporting her ever since. But it's been awesome to watch her grow, because I've got to watch her grow from that experience and that story and that life into the person she is today. And so how do you help people? Like you write the book, you do the TEDx talk, but people who are dealing with the same type of stuff that you're dealing with or dealt with, how does what you're talking about, what's some of the stuff that how do you help somebody who's dealing with that? Somebody who reads one of those books, what should they get out of it? Or how are you expecting them to be helped by the content that's in one of those books?
Well, I think what someone gets out of it is largely dependent on where they are in their own healing journey. right? So someone could take something away that would be different from what someone else might take away. And that's okay. That's absolutely, it's kind of like when you read a book and 5 or 6 years later, you go back and you read the same book and you're like, man, that quote resonated with me. And it didn't, I didn't even notice it the first time around. Right. So what someone gets out of it is going to be very personal, again, based on where they are in their own journey. But I hope the biggest lesson is that they can get out of it is just the inspiration that says, if I can overcome what I went through, then someone else going through a season of adversity can also overcome what they're going through. And there's no hierarchy on pain, right? It's not like saying, oh, what someone went through was so much worse or so much not as severe as what I went through. It's not about that. Because when you're going through that adversity or that trauma or those trials, those are tough. And there is no hierarchy in saying this is not as severe as what someone else went through. Because it's when you're going through it, it's tough, right? Regardless of what it is. If you're going through it, it's tough. And so it's going to be different for every single one of us. But again, if I could give anyone anything, it's the inspiration that says history is not our destiny, right? What happens to us impacts us and influences us, but it doesn't determine us. I love Myron Golden's quote. Hopefully I can get it right. You can correct me if not, but he says, victimhood happens when we let contributing factors become determining factors, right? Every single one of us could play a story in our head of being a victim, but it doesn't serve us in achieving our goals and our dreams in life, right? The greatest danger we have as leaders and as people is blaming a lack of success on someone or something else. It's easy to do, right? Because the reason we blame other people is there's only one choice, right? One other choice is to blame someone else versus take ownership and responsibility myself. And that's hard to do. It's easy to blame other people. It's easy to say, well, I didn't do this because, or so-and-so made me so mad, or so-and-so made me mad. And that's why I lost my temper, right? It's easy to blame external factors, but that doesn't serve us. It doesn't help us grow. It doesn't help us accomplish or become the best version of ourselves. So we have to take responsibility. Hal Elrod said, the moment I take responsibility for everything is the moment I can change anything.
Yeah. So we've heard a little bit about your backstory now, and we talk about real people getting real results. So share some of those results. You had to come out of that. You started earlier and I interrupted you. You started talking about being homeschooled. You had to go get your GED because when you left home, you didn't have a diploma. So and you didn't want to go back because of the situation you left. It wasn't that was over with. So you had to just carry on, figure out I'm moving forward. So you had to go get a GED. Tell me about that growth, your education journey, and why you did that.
Well, because that opens doors, right? And when you start your own growth journey, a lot of times I think a lot of us focus on competency because culturally there is a lot of emphasis on that's how you get ahead, is you get a better job or get a degree or get a certificate. So that was the only step I knew to do, right? Is that's what I knew to do because that's what I had heard other people say. And so, yeah, I had to go get my GED. I started community college, taking classes nights and weekends. And, I did eventually leave Pizza Hut and go on to some other jobs. But a long time, it was working at least one job and sometimes two and going to school at night and weekends. And, there were a lot of sacrifices during those years, right? A lot of sacrifices of doing the fun stuff or the easy stuff on the weekends because you're studying and trying to work full time or two jobs on top of that. You give up, right? But that's life. You give up to go up, and you got to give up more to keep staying up and to keep going and continuing to climb. And that's okay. It's just recognizing that when it comes to sacrifice, we feel the loss first before we get the benefits. And so we have to keep that goal in mind and say, I got to give up now in order to gain in the future.
Yeah. So tell me what all degrees or whatever did you actually get as you went through? Because I know you share when we speak all the time, it took you 10 years to get that degree you needed to have to really get that career and that job that you wanted, that you later gave up, which we'll get to in a minute. But what actual degrees did you get during those 10 years? Just rattle them off.
I got an associate's in applied science and office management with an emphasis on medical coding. And then I went back to school and got a Bachelor of Science in Human Resource Management. And then I went back and got a MBA. And, at some point I settled on just looking at what I wanted to do. And I really appreciated the healthcare industry, but on the administrative side, right? Not,
Yeah.
I've done plenty of direct patient care and working in a couple of doctor's offices, but I've always found my strength again was in the details and the administrative side of things. So it took a lot of time. I think it took me like 5 or 6 years to get that first associate's degree. And then I did an accelerated program for the next 2. So those came a little bit quicker, but a lot of time spent studying. But I looked around and I thought, I needed that degree again to open some doors in the career. And I was working in a hospital at the time when we still lived in Auburn, and I had a great job, a great organization. I had a great boss. I had great leadership.
Hey, hang on a minute. I know where you're going now. We ain't ready to go there yet.
Okay.
You about to talk about giving up that job, but we got to talk about you having that job first. So I wanted to ask you about your educational steps, and you rattle those off. And I got to tell everybody, I'm a big cheerleader of Rhea. She ain't gonna tell you, but she made a 4.0 all the way through. She was working full time somewhere doing something. She was going to the gym. She kept our house flawless, spotless. She was always there for anybody that needed her, and she still made a 4.0 somehow. And that's because she don't play around. She's serious business. So when she decides to apply herself, she does it in a big way. So we talked about that journey of 10 years of going to school, and then take me through like your progression from a waitress at Pizza Hut. Tell me those jobs you had for the folks who don't know.
Wow.
How'd you step up? What were the jobs you had that got you to the part where you gave it up? Take me all the way through your professional career before you gave up your job to do this, and then we'll jump back into where you were giving up that job that you worked so hard to get. All of this progression. So step me through those positions.
Well, I started off as a waitress at Pizza Hut, and then I made shift manager there. And then knowing, the thing is that I made pretty good money waiting tables, right? That's a good thing. You can make money when you're willing to work hard, but I knew that wasn't helpful.
Also, as you tell this journey of your professional growth, your job growth, whenever you get to the one you were in when you actually went to school, to make sure you say, okay, this one I started school, college, because I don't remember when you started. You probably maybe do.
Yeah, I started college in May of 2002, so I was still working at Pizza Hut.
Oh, were you? Okay, you started. You got hungry quick to go start climbing. Okay, go ahead.
Yep. And then I took I thought would be more of an office type job, right? And so I knew that would help. I needed some better experience than just waiting tables. So I took a sort of an office type administrative secretary type job. That wasn't a great situation. And so I didn't stay there very long. And then I went with just attempt to hire agency, and they placed me in a doctor's office. And that ended up being, they offered me a full-time position there. So I started as a receptionist and then moved on to an optometric tech. I think I got 2 certifications as a para-optometric tech, level 1 and level 2. I had a lot of flexibility in my role there. So that was kind of cool because I got to just do some different things and, learning an incredible amount. And let me think. Then I moved on to an orthopedic office. And again, I had to take a step back because I'd worked a little bit way up in the optometric tech position, took a step back to go back to a receptionist role, but in a much bigger orthopedic clinic.
Yeah.
And, a little bit of a sacrifice, a little bit of a step back. And at that point, I was still working on that associate's degree. This probably was about 2006. Yep. Pecking away one class at a time, working. I kept on waiting tables even after I started working in an office because, frankly, I enjoyed the extra money and we certainly could have used it at the time. So
Yeah. Is that when you were at Outback?
nope, hadn't gotten to the Outback yet. And
Okay.
then
You're still waiting tables at Pizza Hut, you mean?
yeah,
While
even
you're
as
doing
late
that? I
as
can't even remember all that stuff.
2003, I think.
Okay.
So
Also, Rhea, when you get to the 2008 year when you started working on character development, make sure you point that out, because everyone who's listening knows during all this time you're sharing, you were working on your competency, your college stuff. So make sure you share when you get to that point where the character growth started blending in as well as you shared this.
So I got done with my associate's degree in 2007 and had been promoted from the receptionist at the orthopedic clinic to a medical assistant, and went back to school again, starting to earn those credits I needed to go get my bachelor's degree. And this was about 2007, and we read as an office in the organization, we read a book called the fish philosophy, the one about that talks about the flying fish in
Oh yeah.
Seattle. And
were you office manager there or not? You haven't said that. You hadn't got to that part yet?
I wasn't quite there yet. Yeah.
Okay.
That happened a few months later. So that was kind of the first real introduction towards kind of some character growth,
Okay.
leadership type books. Got promoted there to the office manager at that organization, and sort of hit a kind of a plateau where I realized I was working and still working as a full-time medical assistant, and had taken on the office manager responsibilities. And, I was working 60 plus hours a week and trying to do both jobs, and recognizing I couldn't do that and go back to school. And that was important to me. I knew I wasn't done. So I found an opportunity to work with a hospital there where we lived. And that started there in January of 2008. That was probably when really the biggest character growth opportunities started to happen. Number one, the organization where I was at, the hospital where I was at, they offered leadership development. They offered different classes and growth opportunities. They offered to send me to a LeaderCast event where I got to see John Maxwell speak, and some other speakers. And that was in May of 2008. I bought my first real leadership book.
Yep.
And
you
I
were not in
remember
college at this time? You were through with your associates, but not in college?
I was done with my associates, and I had not yet started back
Okay.
for my bachelor's degree.
Okay.
And I remember bringing that book home, and I think I paid like $30 for books. And for you and I both at the time, that was a good chunk of money, but it was a really big chunk of money to have spent on just books, And I remember you were you were supportive, but you were like, what are you going to get out of those books? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm going to read them, and then I'm going to figure it out,
And look behind both of us. We
I
we
know.
kept
Look
that
at all
habit
of
up.
those books.
You started all that, Rhea. Look at that. What you caused.
That very first John Maxwell book that I bought. So that was 2008. I started really growing in opportunities at the hospital, and
What was the name of that book, real quick? You remember?
the Leadership Gold.
Is that what it was?
Gold. Yep, Leadership Gold.
Okay.
And just continued to be blessed by opportunities and leaders who poured into me, offering opportunities. I went back to school to get my bachelor's degree in human resource management. And, again, that was kind of 2008 was a big year in so many ways, because I started reading character growth books, but that's also when I became inspired to start teaching group fitness.
Okay.
And that's, I would have told you at the time that was really a calling, because I was so passionate about it. I would go teach before work, and then I'd go back to teach after work. And, I would teach if I was sick.
What's that mean? Group fitness. You teach group fitness. What's that mean?
Group fitness is where a bunch of people get together in the gym and do an exercise class together. So it could be a spin class. It could be aerobics class.
Spin. What's spin?
Like a spin bike, like a stationary bike.
Okay.
It could be mixed martial arts. It could be weights. I did a lot. I did almost everything teaching in the gym.
All those classes.
I taught all of them. And it's not really much different than what we do today, right? I was inspiring people in the physical dimension of health, and today it's more we're inspiring people in the emotional and mental dimension. But I knew that I had a little bit of a calling toward inspiring people at that point.
So that was a
Again,
part-time job,
that was a part-time job on top of working full-time at the hospital.
but you love
And
that part-time job. I know you love that stuff.
I did.
For a lot of
I
years, you
did.
love that. Still do.
I still would. I still would. And then on top of that, I went back to school as well. So I was working a part-time job, a full-time job, and going to school full-time. And, that was 2010 when I started going back to school. Took me
And
a year to get done.
Yeah, and we started mountain biking and mountain bike racing. You were running some whatever those outdoor races were you were doing, and then we started mountain biking and mountain bike racing. So we rode 2,000 or 3,000 miles of mountain biking a year to get conditioned for that. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that, because that's something else you had on your plate while you were keeping the house spotless and making 4.0 GPA. You were doing all that stuff. That's why I wanted to get Rhea on this episode and share about the results that she got. Not to say it in a pride and ego kind of way, but both of us have gotten results. But I wanted Rhea to share some of that story, so people who don't know. So keep going. It's good stuff. And you can actually, if you're watching, you can see Rhea's link to get her preview her books, rheastory.com/download, in case you're listening on the podcast, can't see that. And you can go to rheastory.com/TEDx if you want to watch the video. I forgot to mention that earlier. If you're listening on audio, you're not seeing this stuff. But if you go check it out on the YouTube channel, you'll see this stuff. All right, Rhea, catch back up. I had to interrupt you. I had to throw in that we started mountain bike riding and racing. And actually, she was the 2011 and 2012 state champion in Alabama and Georgia both years. So she had four state championships in her division. So she was excelling at everything. Keep going, Rhea.
Well, like I mentioned, I'm an Enneagram achiever, and at some point I thought that's what success is accomplishment. Once I got done with my bachelor's degree, I was really fortunate to be given an opportunity there in the hospital. They did a special kind of a hybrid opportunity where 20 of us from the organization were offered the chance to go get an MBA, and we were able to do that on campus. So they brought the faculty from Auburn and Auburn University Montgomery to us. So we didn't have to travel. We didn't have to drive. We were able to go to school during work hours.
What's that mean when you say on campus?
Well, they brought the teachers to us there at work. So
okay, so you're calling the hospital the campus, because most people who go to college call the college the campus.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So
I didn't have to drive. Teachers. Yep, they brought the teachers to us, and we got to go through as a group. Right, all 20 of us there worked there. We knew each other. We were all going through the same classes, the same material. So it was just an incredible opportunity to be able to have that, and that might be the only reason that I was able to go get that MBA, because at that point I was almost just tired of going to school, but it was just such an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, they brought the school to you. Instead of you going to school, they brought the school to you.
Yep. So, when I graduated from that program, it was 2012, May of 2012. And by that point, I'd been promoted a couple of times in my role at the hospital. So still in the same department, but had been promoted a couple of times and given a lot more responsibility, moving up from a coordinator to a manager to a director level in the organization. And I think right about this time was where I probably faced some of my biggest leadership challenges, because I was given a lot more responsibility, a lot more opportunity. But with that came some leadership challenges that I had not experienced. I'd managed people as a formal authority leader for years in different organizations. But I learned a lot more about leadership in that role when the challenges were much bigger, honestly. And so there was a lot more growth. There was a lot more frustration until I learned to navigate some of those challenges. but I was really much more intentional. From 2008 to 2012, I was much more intentional about my growth and reading and development, and that helped accelerate my leadership journey. And I knew I needed it, right? I had some aha moments of saying, oh, early in my journey, there wasn't a lot of humility. There was some confidence and maybe more than a touch of arrogance. But I had come face to face with, oh, wait, I don't know it all, right? And that's the realization that helps us be aware of the importance of growth. I don't know what I don't know. And until I know that I don't know it, I'm not going to be interested in learning it.
So you talked about, before we go on to what happened after that, when you got fired up, I know what's coming. It's what you started telling earlier, but you talked about you started 2007 or 8 when you kind of got introduced to the leadership, personal growth kind of development. And anybody who knows us knows I always say personal development is a foundation for leadership development, and character development equals leadership development. But for anybody listening, check out bluecollarleadership.com/book study training. That's a link on how to use our books to facilitate workforce development and leadership development right where you are, in a simple way, a very cost-effective way. All you got to do is purchase a few books for your team members. But Rhea and I have the video, and there's some testimonials there, but there's a 45-minute video on how to actually facilitate a high-impact book study. So anyway, saw Rhea pop that up, and it kind of distracted me, my ADD type stuff I got. I ain't ever been diagnosed with ADD, but I'm sure I would have it if I went and got checked out. But anyway, so Rhea, you talk about some of the struggles you had in your leadership roles a little bit. So, and I know, as we've kept growing, we've been both reading constantly since 2008, and you started for you in 2007 with that fish book, I guess. And what books have you written, and why are they important for those leaders who might be struggling? And what's some of the things leaders struggle with that you address in your books that could actually help them? I mean, if people didn't want to get us to come speak to their team and that sort of stuff, that costs a little bit more, obviously, and people have to get folks assembled in a room, and we do all that kind of stuff. But individual leaders, what kind of stuff do you help them with, and which books did you write that you'd like to recommend to them to help people get through what you went through?
Well, I think one of the greatest frustrations that we face as leaders is just lack of influence, right? And not understanding why we don't have influence. Because as leaders, a lot of times there are people on our team who are capable of more and know more is expected. And we know they can do more, but they don't do more, right? And so the research shows us that the difference between productivity between a leader, or between someone who follows a leader because they want to and someone who follows a leader because they have to, is as much as 40%. But I think the leadership frustration is just not understanding, I, as the leader, need to do something different if I'm not able to influence this person. And so, but that's a little bit of a humble moment as a leader, right? Now, there are going to be a few people that for whatever reason, they don't value it. Maybe they don't have the value of a great work ethic, right? Maybe you just don't share values with them, and maybe they're just not a great fit for your team or for the organization, right? If that's the case. But most of the time, if we as the leader take responsibility for increasing our influence, we will find that we can do it. So the first book I would recommend is The Ladder of Influence, 5 Steps for Climbing to the Next Level and Beyond. That's really going to help on both a personal level and a professional level, getting influence at home, getting influence at work. I talk about the different steps on the ladder of influence, and there are 5 of them. And then I talk about very specific checklists for you to do some self-reflection. How am I applying this at work? How am I applying this at home? How am I doing with my kids or my spouse, right? Because the same influence that helps us at work is going to help us influence at home in those personal relationships, if we will learn the principles and be intentional about applying them. And then I've got Leadership Gems.
Hang on before you go to the next book. So that book, The Ladder of Influence, that's a phenomenal book. I loved reading that one myself when you wrote it. I still do. I like that book. That's really, really good book. And your books are on paper. They're a paperback, ebook, and audio books. These books we're talking about. So you got all kind of ways to access it. But just this morning, we're recording this on August 3rd, 2024. And just this morning, Jason Denham, Kilgore Industries, a construction company, a big MEP construction company out in Texas. And actually, if you want to watch Jason's episode, I interviewed him. He was episode 1 in the Real People Getting Real Results series. So if you're listening or watching, you want to go check that out on the YouTube channel. He's episode 1, the guy we're talking about now. But we get on there, Rhea, and tell everybody what he does, and because right now he's taking his team through that book, but he uses that book 2 different ways. And I know he's talked to you about it. He sends me messages about how much he loves the ladder of influence. But talk about what, as you've been getting on that call, how he uses that book on his Saturday call, and then how he uses it during his weekly, then those 4 events. So talk about those 2 different things and what you've seen happen as he's leading his team, and just talk about that, because that's pretty neat.
Yeah, so Jason leads his team, and he has 4 different sessions throughout the week with different members of his staff and his team. So they, 4 different opportunities where they meet together, a group of 4 to 10 people. They read a chapter a week, and then, just as we talk about in the book study training video, they go through it, and then everyone has an opportunity to share. And it's interesting because Jason says, I think that is the most effective 2 hours, right? 4 30-minute sessions. I think that's the most effective 2 hours out of my week every week as a leader, because that's where the growth comes, right? That's where the growth comes, not for just him as the leader, but for those on his team who are going through the sessions.
Yeah, those are 4 30-minute sessions with groups of 10 people, a different group every time. So he's really impacting 40 different people with the same chapter, doing it 4 times. Yeah, and I hear him say what you said all the time. He said it today all the time, that's the most important couple of hours of his week, those 4 sessions that he leads.
Yep. And then once a month, he does just an open, even to the public, but it's open to the team organization wide, but also other people who are just interested. And he does this virtually, where once a month they go through 3 chapters. Again, go through a chapter. Everyone has an opportunity to add in thoughts or reflections. And they cover 3 chapters a month. So, finishing.
How does he do that?
He does it virtually online. So, everyone can dial in from wherever they are in the United States, even. It's neat to see people get on when they're on vacation, right? They still want to call in and get that monthly dose of leadership and personal development. So it's pretty cool to see that. People even not on Jason's team, but from other organizations, or people who are just inspired with becoming the best version of themselves, and they're hungry for growth. So it's great to see that.
Okay, so get back to your story. I just wanted to share that's how some people are using that book. But what other books? He's actually doing a different book now with his 4 book studies that he's doing during the week. Which book's he doing? Which book? He was bragging on it today. Which book is that?
I think he was talking about Straight Talk, The Power of Effective Communication. In that book, I really talk about connection, not just the communication skills, but the ability to connect with someone so that your message is received as it's intended, right? And that helps your influence. And then I would say leadership gems. I have leadership gems for women, so a women-specific version, and then just leadership gems, 30 characteristics of very successful leaders. And, that's where I talk about just some of the characteristics of a leader, like be inspirational, be authentic, be proactive, be courageous, right? So those character traits that are, they're not just 30 character traits for successful leaders, but I had to start the book somewhere, right? So you can't put everything in the book. So I chose the 30 that were probably most impactful for me. But I know that they resonate with a lot of other people too. So those are the 3 that I would start with. And in the ladder of influence, in the back of it, I actually have recommendations for personal growth, professional growth. And so kind of what I would recommend at each level on the ladder of influence, each step.
Okay. So Straight Talk, for me, one reason that's powerful, a book for you, is because how you grew up. You didn't grow up being hanging out with people. You wasn't socializing with people. You were kind of kept away from people. When I met you, you didn't really know how to socialize very well, I would say. And you seem to be doing very well. When I see you now, we go into crowds. You do better at interacting with the crowds just randomly than I do. And I like to connect for a very specific reason, but you're very good at just connecting in general, right? I like to connect. If I'm talking to people, I want to be helping them with growth and development, personal growth, leadership development. I'm so passionate about that. That's all I want to talk about. But so I don't do good at just random socializing, but now you do. But the reason that I was saying that about that book was because there's a lot of, pretty much my 20-year career, all I ever heard was, we need communication training. We need communication. That's always the problem. Everybody always lack of communication. So any organization, any individuals, leaders, wherever they thinking that, or they hearing that, or they're saying that, lack of communication. What is it about that book that would help those folks? Because I know it ain't really a communication book. It ain't really about communication, although that's the title of it. What's it really about?
Well, like I said, it's really about the connection piece, right? Being able to authentically connect with someone so that your message is received and received how you intended it. And that's foundational, right? That's our character. That's our the communication itself, how to actually construct a sentence and deliver it. That's competency. But it's the character side of us that makes that message effective. And that's how we do what we do, which is what we talk about. 87 to 90% of success in life is based on character. Only 10% to 13% is based on competencies. And that's why it's so important for us to be intentional with leadership and personal growth and character development, because that's going to multiply what we know how to do, right? Character multiplies competency.
Yeah. So let's get back to you at the hospital. You trucking along, 2012, everything's great. That's where you left off.
Yep. And, along that time, again, a lot of leadership growth. You got really passionate about leadership development in late of August of 2012, and you went down for some leadership training with John Maxwell, and I went to the next leadership training with John Maxwell opportunity, I think about 6 months later in February. And that's where I heard Les Brown speak. And of course, Les Brown is a fabulous motivational speaker, but he's speaking to this whole conference room full of people, and he's like, you have a story to share, and someone needs to hear your story, and you can help that person. And, again, I'd been teaching group fitness for years, and I'd definitely been inspired and felt called to help people, but I thought that was through helping them with their physical dimension of health. And it was really kind of a light bulb moment to go, maybe that's why I was able to overcome the adversity that I faced, is because I could turn around and help somebody else with that. But I thought, you know what? I don't want to tell my story. I worked really hard to leave that behind. I didn't want people to see me differently. I didn't want people to know what I'd been through. I didn't want people to see me as a victim. And so I was just kind of like, took that thought and shoved it in the closet. And I was like, nope, I don't want to share that story, and you can't make me. But it was the next 6 months were a lot of growth again. You and I went to Guatemala with John Maxwell, and helping teach leadership principles to the nation of Guatemala.
Yeah, that was June 2013. You first went in February 2013 to the John Maxwell training that you were talking about, and then June we went to Guatemala with John.
Yeah,
of 2013.
And so August of 2013 came, and we had signed up for a speaker training with Les Brown. And part of the speaker training was everyone had to create a 60-second speech, because Les Brown says the best speakers make the fewest words go the farthest. And you could say anything you wanted, but you could only speak for 60 seconds, which is an incredible challenge to deliver an effective message in 60 seconds. I would challenge anyone to be able to do that. It takes a lot of.
It was tough, because I did it too with you. I was at a different table, but it was tough for all of us that was doing it. Everyone in there. It was a hard thing to do.
Yeah. And I didn't even share with anyone, even you, that I was thinking about sharing my story publicly, because I didn't know if I could. It had so much control over me. And so the day of the conference and the speaker training came, and I remember just having like a meltdown, like mascara running, ugly crying in the ladies' room, meltdown. Because it had just had so much power over me, so many years of shame and false sense of guilt and pain. And I didn't know if I could open that up publicly and not have a meltdown. So but I repaired the mascara and went into the conference room and shared my ended up being 47-second story.
You over
And
delivered.
it
That
didn't
high
matter.
achiever came out in you again.
Right?
You had 60 seconds, but you had to show out and get it done in 47.
It didn't matter if I'd won the contest at that point, right? I'd won a much greater victory in just owning my story. And I say it, I think I talked about it earlier, until we own it, it's going to own us, right? And so that's how I just say the past is not going to hold me back any longer. So that was August of 2012. And 10 days after sharing my story publicly for the first time, I went and resigned from that job that I'd gone to college for 10 years to get, because I discovered the difference between a career and a calling. And I did win the contest. As it turns out, I was one of the 5 winners chosen and invited to speak in Los Angeles with Les Brown a few months later.
Yeah, that was awesome. And you come back and resigned after that session.
Yeah. And I think at the time that you put on your LinkedIn profile speaker or trainer and people hire you to speak, and it let's just be honest, it doesn't work like that. There were some ramen noodle months or years. There were some ramen noodle years because you were on the same passion or the same path relative to switching from being a consultant to being a leadership trainer. And I wanted to get into the leadership speaking. And, we gave up everything to do what we do. We sold our house, we sold our cars, and you had a Corvette, and I used to call it the other woman. And, there were a lot of sacrifices. You don't go from 2 very successful careers to being hard broke for a long time without making some lifestyle changes. And you used to say, I remember you would say, I am so passionate about this, I would go live under a bridge. And I'm like, I'm not living under the bridge. We have got to figure it out.
We got close
before we get to the bridge. I'm not living under the bridge.
We got close to the bridge.
And we did figure it out, as it turns out, but we did have to give up everything, cash in our retirement, move to a small apartment, just a lot of sacrifices, but neither one of us have regretted it for a single second.
When did you write your first book? During all that process. So where are we at now? You turned in your resignation in 2013 at the end of the year.
Yep.
You gave like a 4-month notice, I remember. You didn't give a 2-week notice. You gave a 4-month notice.
Well, I felt I owed that as much to my leader as to my team, right? Most of them I had the privilege of interviewing them and bringing them onto my team. And, there's certainly a sense of I'm leaving them, right? But I knew that we needed time for the transition and to make that as a smooth and effective for everybody concerned. So yeah, January of 2013 was the last real day on the job, real job, I guess, if you want to call it like that. And I was still teaching group fitness, and again, continued that probably up until 2018, because I was just so passionate about that. And I wrote the first book in 2014, first 2 books in 2014. Because, early on when we started, we thought writing a book is going to help us move us forward. And we weren't out speaking and talking or training all of the time. So we had time to sit down and write a book, right?
What was the name
of the book? And then we wrote another book. It was Achieve. Achieve was my first book, the little bitty version, the 64-page, 4 inches by 4 inches pages, tiny. And I didn't have much to say, right? Because there again, it's neat to look back and say, wow, I've grown since then. I have a lot more to say now, but it's because I've been intentional about putting a lot more in. And that's a sign of growth.
But you revised that book. It's a regular size book now.
I did. Yep. So we wrote another book and then another book, and you were writing books. And, today we've got
second book.
My second book was Ria's story, about my personal story. And that was in late 2014.
What caused you to write a book about your story there? Your first book
Well,
wasn't about your story. It was just about
it's just
personal growth
leadership
and
and
development,
personal growth.
leadership
Yeah.
type stuff. So then you
Well,
decided,
I thought there would be people who would be helped by reading it. And
we,
that's why we write a story like that, right? That's why we share a story like that.
all right, you about ready to wrap it up? You want to keep going?
Nope. That's been quite a journey since then. But like you said, you couldn't have imagined where our growth would have taken us, right? You just have to be intentional about growing and developing, and you just don't know the doors that will come and the opportunities that will come.
What's some of the neatest things you got to do since you stepped away from your corporate career? You spent all those 10 years to get that job, and then you just gave it up, stepped out. What's some of the most amazing things that you've gotten to do that stand out?
Oh man, we've done so much. It's hard to think about all of them. Well, giving the TEDx talk was certainly a unique opportunity, right?
What year
Because
was that?
that was 2018. Yeah,
17?
2017. And the idea behind TEDx is an idea we're sharing. So it's certainly a privilege to be invited to say, you have an idea we're sharing. And how can you make an impact with that opportunity? And yeah, we spoke at Yale. I spoke at the US Capitol. You and I have been to working with prison wardens from across the country. We got to tour San Quentin. We got to tour the Ohio Reformatory for women. So just some unique opportunities to do things we obviously wouldn't have been able to do. But I think the neatest thing is just being able to make an impact in the lives of other people, right? That's probably the most significant thing for me, is just knowing that other people have been able to learn the same leadership personal growth principles that we learned and apply them to their own journey and have gotten results, right? And hopefully we've been able to accelerate their results. There aren't any shortcuts on the journey of success. But you and I are both passionate about sharing the lessons that we've learned, the wins, the losses, the failures, and the successes. And hopefully somebody else can accelerate their growth journey just a little bit more.
Yep, because that's what we really do. Just like you just said, there are no shortcuts on this journey, but you can travel at different speeds, and that's what we help people do. We help individuals, we help leaders within organizations accelerate their development, accelerate their journey, their cultural transformation, if it's organizational type deal, or their personal transformation. So what resources do you have, Rhea? I guess we're going to wrap it up. Sounds like you're ready to wrap it up here.
Well, we have our books, we have our podcasts, we have our YouTube channel. We have a ton of resources, and most of them are available at little to no cost, right? There's information out there. The greatest thing that holds us back in life is not the lack of knowledge, it's the application. So that's where I encourage people to just be intentional with their daily growth plan, whatever that looks like for them. If it's reading a paragraph a day or listening to a podcast a week or whatever it is. But yeah, you and I both have tons of resources. You can download sample chapters from many of our books, bluecollarleadership.com/download. You can also find a link to my website and chapters from my books from that as well. So start there and just keep growing. That's what I like to say. Keep growing, keep going, and keep climbing.
Yep. And we got the Blue Collar Leadership Academy. We've got 7 online courses out there now. One of them is your Ladder of Influence book.
Yeah.
And then
absolutely.
also we've got Change Happens, Leading Yourself and Others Through Change, that we wrote together. So we got tons of resources. Where can people get in touch with you, Rhea?
Yeah, you can find me, get in touch with me, riastory.com. So riastory.com.
All right. And you're on LinkedIn?
LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Instagram. We're pretty social, you and I.
You got a podcast?
Got a podcast? Yep. You can just search most podcast platforms, search for my name, Rhea Story, or Fearfully and Wonderfully Me.
All righty. And you got a newsletter on LinkedIn?
Got a newsletter on LinkedIn. Yep. So connect with me on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, anything I didn't ask you, or anything you want to share?
I don't think so.
All right. All right, folks. Thanks for listening or watching. If you like this thing, make sure you share it with some folks. Maybe they can get some motivation and inspiration out of Rio's story and accelerate their journey. All right. Thanks, Ria. Talk to you next time.
Make it happen or someone else will. It might as well be you. Are you serious about taking your career and your life to the next level and beyond? Check out Mac Story's Blue Collar Leadership series books and others, now available on audio, along with paperback and ebooks at Amazon and Audible. Please visit bluecollarleadership.com to learn about Mac's books, programs, special offers, and more. Thank you for listening to the Blue Collar Leadership Podcast.